I've started watching this debate between Alex O'Connor and Ben Shapiro, and I must say I'm really enjoying it. I didn't catch a lot of the back and forth that was going on YouTube, well, maybe about a year ago, but it seems like a lot of this debate is revolving around some of those subjects that they've already spoken about. I haven't finished the debate either, but the first section was really interesting to me, so I figured I'd quickly just throw out a couple thoughts on it. Number one, I should say the debate has been really civil and friendly so far, and I'm really happy to see that this is the direction these sorts of conversations are going in. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, this would not have been the way this conversation happened. So I'm really excited about that. I also typically like a lot of the stuff that Alex O'Connor does. And Ben Shapiro, he's hit or miss for me, but I'm pretty much like that with anyone who's a political leaning sort of person. But I also think that Ben brought a lot of good points to the table, and he definitely wasn't steamrolled by Alex, and I think that's good because Alex O'Connor's a smart guy. So as to the substance of the conversation, it starts out talking about free will. Ben's initial point is that everyone has a sense of having free will, whether it's a true sense or not. We all kind of function in that way. And if our senses and the senses of pretty much everyone who has preceded us are true, that's only possible given the existence of a God. Alex's retort is that it may be that we all have a sense of free will, and that sense is wrong, and we don't. And then we get to the meat of the issue that I really want to talk about. The point that Alex makes is basically one through logic. He makes a couple of points, but logic is the main thrust of his point here. And he uses the law of the excluded middle, which basically says that if you have a proposition, it could either be true or false, but that proposition can't be both, or it can't be something in the middle. Given that, he takes any thing that might be happening, anything that is caused, and says, does this thing have a cause? Does this action have a cause? This thought have a cause? This motion have a cause? And if the answer is yes, then it's caused by that thing. If the answer is no, then it's completely random with no cause at all. And so he's trying to build this causal chain, saying that everything is caused by something before it, or it's caused by something random. And either way, there is no free will. Now, Ben's response is basically to say that the soul or the self may not actually be kind of break-upable in that way, and that we can't possibly say that the self has all these determined parts which are caused by other things, but that there may be something going on that's a little more mysterious there. And the conversation moves on from there, talking about a bunch of other things in the line of free will. But I want to camp there for a little while. The first thing I was thinking of with this conversation is that there are actually quite a few Christian determinists. There are lots of Christians who believe that everything is predetermined. These are your more Calvinist-leaning Christians. And really, they make very little points of separation from a materialist determinist, besides the fact that the ultimate cause is God rather than, whatever the cause is at the end of the causal chain for the materialists. So I think it's kind of funny that free will was used to explain why we need God, and some people who believe in God actually don't believe that. Now, I used to be one of those people. I used to be a fairly deterministic Christian. And I'm still a Christian, but I am not a deterministic one. And so I think that I've got maybe a perspective that might be helpful in this debate. But you can totally see how a Christian might get there, right? If you have a God that is completely in control of everything, omnipotent, omnipresent, it's hard to see how anything can happen without that control being instituted, without it being part of the equation. So, these Christians will believe that God caused all things. And of course, that leads to a lot of, problems, a lot of ethical problems and concerns to that end. But it is a consistent view within Christianity, and it is one that's held by many. But I think we can get around that, and we can also get around some of Alex's points in a pretty easy way. I think the first thing that I would say is that the law of the excluded middle may not be something that applies all the way down as we think about very small things, as we think about physics and as we think about metaphysics particularly. It may not be something that we can rely on to explain the fundamental nature of things, of the world and of ourselves. That makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And it also kind of sounds like a cop-out, like, oh, just forget logic. But I don't think that's exactly true. Even as we start thinking about what we were learning in physics as people make advances. Now, I'm no physicist. I don't know a whole lot about these things, but what I am understanding is that we're seeing the world looks a lot different than we thought it did. Certain things are acting in ways that we didn't expect, and some things are essentially doing two things at once. We can't really tell the difference whether something is here or whether something is there, or whether it's in one state of matter or another state of matter. There tends to be ambiguity when we look at these small, fast-moving things. And so it's not hard to believe that when we apply these things to the soul and to really fundamental causes, there may be some sense in which, yes, this is both A and B, or something in the middle. I'm not opposed to saying that the law of the excluded middle can not apply in this instance. But another argument against determinism, and frankly my favorite one, is actually not an argument from logic at all. In fact, it's not one that probably would have been super appropriate in this debate. But I like to think about the world. And I mean, I think Christians do this a lot. They say, oh, it's very complex and there's very interesting things going on. Therefore, God must have created it. But I'm trying to be much more specific than that. Think about the weird stuff that you've seen on Reddit, for instance, if you've ever been to Reddit, which I hope you haven't. Think about the weird stuff that you'll see, in the weird sections of YouTube. I mean, whatever you want to fill that in with. Some guy buys a furry costume and dances the Harlem Shake while, I don't know, eating a hamburger, whatever. Like some very strange thing that you would just expect never to happen. And the determinist would have to say that is all atoms in motion moving up to that point. So at one point, there was an explosion in space, or we wouldn't even call it space, right? There was a big thing that happened, and everything started expanding, and everything started moving, and these things started colliding and interacting. And somewhere in that interaction, many, many years down the road, we have a guy putting on a furry costume. And that is supposed to be determined from the beginning of time. That is insane. The fact that would ever happen based on anything, any kind of causal chain, just doesn't make sense to me. And I mean, like I said, it's not an argument as much as it is just, in my opinion, common sense. It just can't be. And so, whatever you have to say about that, I know it's not one that's going to make it into the philosophy textbooks, but I do think it's a good point. But to put a lid on this, I do think we have free will. And I do think that free will is important for society. And I do think that free will is more indicative of a theistic worldview than an atheistic worldview. But I concede that on both sides of the aisle, there are people who do not believe in free will, and they get along just fine. I'm really excited to keep watching this debate, and if I have any other thoughts, I'm going to hopefully share them here. Let me know what you thought about this, and I will catch you next time.